Morning, everyone. Continuing with the laws of davening, we're on Kuf Daled Seif Zayin 104.7, and we're going to talk about what happens if you're davening Shmona Esrei and you have a lot of kavana, so you're davening for a long time, and then the Chazan starts the repetition of the Shmona Esrei, or he starts saying Kadish. Do you interrupt to respond to Kadish, Kedusha, Baruch Hu, anything like that? So let's see. Einu posek lo lekadish v'lo lekadusha. One should not interrupt his Shmona Esrei, not to answer for Kadish and not to answer for Kedusha. Ela yishtok v'yichaven l'masha omer shliach tzibor v'yikaona. Rather, you should be quiet, and you should be quiet and think about what the Chazan is saying, and it will be like you answered. So if you're davening Shmona Esrei, let's say it's Ma'ariv, and the Chazan starts saying Kadish, so you should not respond to Kadish, but you should pause in your own Shmona Esrei and have kavana, have intent for what the Chazan is saying, and it'll be like you're answering. Let's say you're in the middle of Shmona Esrei, and the Gabbai doesn't realize, and he calls you up for an aliyah. You do not go up to the Torah. Mishnah Brura, Lekadish, Rotzelomer la'amein Yeheshmei Rabba, v'hu adin lebarchu. We should not respond to Yeheshmei Rabba, or if one's davening and he hears Baruch Hu, he does not respond to Baruch Hu. Right? We can't respond to Yeheshmei Rabba. That's one of the benefits of going to shul when you have a minyan, is that Yeheshmei Rabba is such a powerful thing to say, that the part of Kadish that we answer. It says that even if someone has an evil decree for 70 years written against him, it gets ripped up if he says Yeheshmei Rabba with all of his might, with all of his intensity and thought. But if one's davening Shmona Esrei, he doesn't respond. Yishtok ad yisbarach. So now the Mishnah Berurah says that one only is quiet listening to Kadish until Yisbarach, which is in the middle of Kadish. So just the first half of Kadish, one has to be quiet and to pay attention to. But when the Chazan continues with Yisbarach, then he can continue his Shmona Esrei. V'yikaona, it'll be like answering. Le'inyan sheyetz b'tzei yedechi of Kadish and Kedusha, it'll be like he fulfilled his obligation of Kadish and Kedusha. U'mikol makam lo chashav hefsek, and nevertheless, it is not a hefsek. It is not a interruption. Now, there's a little bit of a debate of how much of Kedusha one has to be quiet for and to listen to. So for sure, Kadosh, 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 one has to be quiet for, and Baruch Kvod, one has to be quiet for. There's a little bit of a debate if one has to respond to be quiet for even the part of Yimloch. The Aruch HaShulchan seems to say yes, that one should be quiet for Yimloch. The Svarim bring others that say you don't. Rav Chaim Kanievsky writes, they bring from him the Sefer Isha Yisrael. If you want to check, he says that one is allowed to listen to the entire Kedusha until Hakel HaKadosh at the end. It seems that Rosh Zalman in one place also says that one's allowed to listen until that point. So if anyone wants to do more research on this, you can look at the Sefer Isha Yisrael on page Shin Mem Tes. He has a lot on this. But for sure, when listening to Kedusha, one should be quiet for Kadosh, 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 and Baruch Kvod. Okay. Now, v'im pasak bazeh. Let's say someone did respond to Kadish and Kedusha in the middle of Shmona Esrei. Then what is the law? V'chein lekadish Kedusha dinu kesach b'mezid. The halacha is like you spoke on purpose. If you remember, we had, we'll read this first. And according to the opinions that say you have to go back to the beginning, if you spoke on purpose, here too you have to go back to the beginning of Shmona Esrei. If you remember last week, we learned that if someone purposely interrupts a Shmona Esrei by speaking, then according to one opinion, he has to go back to the Shmona Esrei. So according to that opinion here too, one would have to go back to the beginning of Shmona Esrei. But the Mishnah Berurah did not definitively decide between those opinions if one actually has to go back to the beginning of Shmona Esrei if he did speak on purpose. Im savar shemoto lahavsik havi keshegig. But let's say somebody didn't know the halacha. He didn't come to the Facebook Live Mishnah Berurah class, and he thought you're supposed to interrupt for Kadish and Kedusha. Then he has the law of like someone who spoke b'shogeg, by accident. And he doesn't go back to the beginning of Shmona Esrei, because we learned last week that if someone speaks in Shmona Esrei by accident, not on purpose, he does not have to go back to the beginning of Shmona Esrei. Let's say he gets called up for an aliyah, and he's at the end of Shmona Esrei, so he's in the end of his Shmona Esrei. He's after Sim Shalom. He's in the part called of Elokai Nitzor, the Tachnunim, and he hasn't yet taken 3 steps back. So then he can go up for the Aliyah, because that really technically is not part of Shemona Esrei. That's Tachnunim, supplications after Shemona Esrei. As long as he said the line of Yu L'Ratzon, which comes after Sim Shalom or Shalom Rav, then if he gets called up, he can go for an Aliyah. But before that, he should not go up for the Aliyah. Okay, Sif Ches in the Shulchan Aruch. Achar Shasim Shemona Esrei brachos kodem Elokai Nitzor Yachal Anas Kedusha v'Kadish u'Barchu. So after speaking at that part of Shemona Esrei, the supplications, if one is in the supplication, so he's finished Shemona Esrei, but he's yet to take 3 steps back, he said Elokai Nitzor, then he can answer Kedusha, Kadish, and Barchu. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hainu she'amar gam Yu L'Ratzon kodem Elokai Nitzor. And we're talking about after he says Yu L'Ratzon, before Elokai Nitzor. So Yu L'Ratzon, that line is like the finish of Shemona Esrei proper, you could call it. So after Shemona Esrei proper, after you say Yu L'Ratzon, then you can interrupt to answer Kadish, Kedusha, and Barchu. The imlokein asur lahafsik, because if you didn't say Yu L'Ratzon, it's forbidden to interrupt. Like we'll say later in Siman 122, and that's what the Rama is referring to here. And with that, we finished Siman Kuf Daled, and God willing, soon we'll start Siman Kuf Hey. Have a beautiful end of the weekend.